Bad news, gang, we lost. I know a lot of you were down in the trenches with me, holding the line against the term bullet heaven. Since Vampire Survivors released, there have been a ton of games where you're weaving around hordes of enemies while auto-attacking. I recently commented in a video that I did need a genre term for these other than Vampire Survivors-like, which is just awful. I've seen bullet heaven thrown around, but other than being a cute mirror to bullet hell, it doesn't really make sense. You're usually dodging enemies, not projectiles, and half the games have Survivor in the title anyway, so why fight that? I landed on Horde Survivor because it felt like the most accurate option. But apparently I was on the wrong side of history because Valve just updated their tagging system and Bullet Heaven has won. It's been a few years since Steam updated their store tags, but they just added 17 new tags, removed 28 others, and made a few modifications. Valve has the most thorough understanding of game trends because it's where everyone buys their games. When they add a genre, as they did in 2018 with Battle Royale or 2023 with Extraction Shooter, they're both observing trends and defining them. Digging into the changes can tell us a lot about where video games are at right now and what issues Steam is hoping to ignore. I'm Jenna Stoeber, your expert on video games, horror, and media oddities. Let's start with the tags they added. Desktop companions have made a huge comeback in recent years, driven by a general 90s and early aughts nostalgia. I came from an e-sheep household myself, but Bonsai Buddy has been a particular focal point of this fad, likely motivated by Nation Squid's viral video. They're largely a crossover of cozy games and mobile idlers, like Neko Atsume but for your desktop. They're probably pretty alluring for the huge number of people who now work from home. You never see this rise in popularity if there is a chance your snitch coworker could see you raking a virtual garden. If you work from home, desktop companions provide a little idle brain break while keeping you close to your work. It's gaming without the guilt of fully opening a video game while you're on the clock. The next three tags are really interesting. Organizing, cleaning, and decorating. The productivity siblings. When I saw these three, I immediately thought, Wilmot's Warehouse, Power Wash Simulator, and Unpacking. And I was pretty close. I nailed it with Power Wash Simulator, but Unpacking was put into the organizing category, while decorating seems to be mostly house flipper and design business games. It's nice to see the cozy games trend reach a point where it needs more specific tags to divide up the offerings. These three tags and Desktop Companion imply that a huge force in video games right now are chill-out, vibey podcast games, the kind where you don't have to be fully engaged to play. Devs are no longer necessarily focused on games that induce flow. Now they're open to being zone-out media. The modern boob tube. Wuxia and Xinxia are, as you might guess, genres that are popular in China, although the first one has a lot of overlap with Western cinema. Wuxia is a low fantasy genre focused on martial artists, and Xinxia is a high fantasy genre focused on mythology and magic users. Most of Steam is accessible through China's government firewall, and it actually has a huge Chinese user base. The introduction of these tags might represent genres that are currently popular with Chinese devs or players, which is pretty cool to see. On the other hand, Valve released a separate state-sanctioned version of Steam called Steam China with publisher Perfect World in 2021. Apparently, it has a significantly limited number of games, the ones approved by the Chinese government. So in that context, what does it mean that Valve is making the international version of Steam more hospitable for Chinese users? Without more information, it's hard to say. Maybe it's just responding to the desires of Wuxia and Xinxia fans. Maybe they're trying to reassure Chinese users that it won't fully abandon them in the international version. Maybe they're worried about how Steam China is functioning. Who can say? Falling Blocks is by far the funniest one on this list to me. They couldn't just call it Tetris or Tetris-like games. No! It's games where blocks fall from the top of the screen and you move or rotate them. No relation. I have seen an increase in Tetris-like games that add on other elements, but that's true for almost any kind of casual gameplay. It's very popular right now to use something like Match 3 or Peggle as the scaffolding to tell a story, or to elaborate on with other mechanics like crafting. I am surprised that the falling blocks version of this trend got a tag, but it just goes to show you that Tetris is the most perfect video game ever made. Espionage overlaps a lot with stealth, a category that already exists on Steam. My best guess is that this is meant to categorize games where you can sneak or can attack, like Hitman. It's about infiltrating. I haven't necessarily seen an increase in this genre, but it also seems to cover investigation games like Puzzle Spy International, so maybe it's about creating a space for games in this vein that aren't action-based. Samurai games have never gone out of style. I don't necessarily think it's more popular right now, but maybe the Ghosts of Tsushima and Yotei justify the introduction. It's more likely meant to complement the pre-existing ninja and pirate tags. It's lopsided not to also have samurai, and a lot of people do just want to play samurai games. Zoo, wolves, capybaras, and animals is a strange pile of tags. Zoos are fairly common setting for work or building sims, but animals is so broad, I don't know what use it's going to be, especially since the zoo tag has basically any game with animals in it anyway. Are there zoos without animals in them? When will Steam stop being cowards and just add a furry tag? Wolves and capybaras are pretty narrow, joining other animal tags like dogs, foxes, horses, and cats. I can see how a player lured in by one capybara game would be interested in another. I'm more surprised that they didn't add a tag for frogs, which are the prominent player animal I see these days. Now, the addition of colts is interesting. Outside of a few examples, I don't think there are a lot of games that are about colts. Plenty of them have colts in them, just look at the Lovecraftian tag, while not being about colts. I wonder if this is supposed to be a counterpoint to the faith tag in order to provide a little bit more nuance in how religion is being depicted. Oh wow, they added a Balatro tag! Just kidding. Obviously, poker video games have been around for forever. But there's no denying that Balatro inspired a lot of poker-ish games. It proved that you can use the aesthetics of poker without just making a poker game. So the category has a lot of straightforward poker games and games that use poker as a style. I can tell you right now, the language learning tag is going to be predominantly Japanese language games. There's a natural overlap between people who want to learn Japanese and people who want to gamify their hobbies, and it's called gamers. No mystery here. Moving on, 28 pre-existing tags were removed. Steam's tagging system was, and still is, pretty all over the place. Many are straight up redundant, like comedy and funny. Two categories span a specific period of time, the 80s and the 90s, and contain games both released during that time and set during that time. There are categories for politics and political, one for games about politics, and one for idiots to weaponize against games that have a black or gay character. And you tell me the difference between farming, farming sim, and agriculture. There are also categories so broad I'm not certain what the purpose is, like nature or tutorial. There's a Steam tag that's just gaming. So what does a tag have to do to get removed? According to the update, there are a few reasons. One is too much overlap. So NSFW and mature were both removed because they overlap with gore, violent, and sexual content. That makes sense. Depending on your job, not safe for work might mean blood or cum or failing to wear a hard hat. Some tags didn't apply broadly enough or were too weak a use case, like drama and ambient. My guess is electronic, experience, narration, and web publishing also fit into this. Some categories were removed for being too subjective, like well-written and masterpiece, and yet we still have the categories soundtrack and great soundtrack. Valve got rid of a few tags because they were IPs, like Lego, Dungeons & Dragons, and Warhammer 40k. People were probably using these on games that had a similar vibe, so it's a shame they got rid of them. If I'm looking for a game that has similar vibe to Warhammer 40k, what tag should I use? Faith or cult? I suspect Valve got rid of these at the behest of the IP owners because they also got rid of Games Workshop, which is the company that owns Warhammer. Kickstarter seems like it was removed for being an IP tag, but they also got rid of crowdfunded, implying that funding has no importance. I'm somewhat inclined to agree, although depending on your definition of indie game, it might be very important. They also got rid of Game Maker and RPG Maker, which is a surprise. Devs have been using RPG Maker for over 30 years, and this tag was a great way to make that long backlog easy to find and navigate. So I doubt this removal was requested by the companies because it's kind of a blow to the community. Whereas I don't think Hasbro gives a shit about that in the face of IP purity. Removing roguevania is interesting because it feels like Steam is trying to end some ongoing conversations about genre titles. Steam has a lot of power to dictate terminology. They might say they're just serving the needs of the community, but Steam is the primary place where people buy games. They are the main conduit between devs and players. It has an impact on the gaming industry and community when they intervene in discussions like Horde Survivor versus Bullet Heaven, or whether roguevania is distinct from roguelikes and Metroidvania. Deleting roguevania is basically Steam saying this isn't a real genre. Similarly, Valve removed documentary as part of a larger purge of cinema-related words. They also nixed movie, feature film, and cult classic. I'm so curious about how the first two of those were used, but it's impossible to know now. I would argue some games are cult classics, but that might fall under the subjective reasoning. Or maybe it was overrun with games about cults, so they just added cult to fix this. Is that related to the removal of Illuminati? I can't say. I somewhat object to the removal of documentary. I realize there aren't a lot of documentary games. It seems like an oxymoron. Games are fully fabricated in sound and audio, and they allow player choice, making a replica of reality pretty much out of the question. Graphic novels have a similar hurdle. Is Mouse a documentary? Is Persepolis? Memoir, autobiographical, or journalistic might be a better term. None of those are categories on Steam right now, but I wish they were. We should hold space for games like Consume Me, an incredible memoir game from last year. Games are inherently sets of rules imposed on a player, so it makes sense to use games to explore how rule systems affect us, either personally in a memoir or socially in a journalistic endeavor. Valve also removed Foreign and America, which don't necessarily feel like organization-related choices. Foreign makes sense to remove because that's a terrible tag. Foreign to whom? To me? To one of Steam's many Chinese users? Coupled with America, it feels like an attempt to avoid tags that might be misused. But if that is the case, it's extra weird that they didn't remove political, a tag that they have to know is being abused. Of course, Valve probably perceives removing political as something that would be controversial explicitly because of who uses it and how they use it. So it just gets to stay. Some tags have just been modified. Clicker became incremental, which is a good move. Conversation became dialogue heavy, which feels a bit more subjective and also a bit negative. Unforgiving has been merged with difficult, which I think is an outright mistake. A game can be difficult without being designed to be difficult. A game that is unforgiving is designed to be unforgiving. Silksong is not difficult, it's unforgiving, and there is a difference. The last noteworthy aspect of this listing was the most commonly used tags. These tags represent what's considered valuable in gaming, either something a dev thinks is good marketing or something a player thinks another player might want to know. Single player, one word, is the most common tag, applied to about 62% of listings. That's over 98,000 games. Weirdly, its popularity reflects a common party line in the gaming community right now, which is that nobody's making single-player games anymore. It's all co-op, friend slop, extraction shooter, hero shooter. All devs know is make loot box and lie. AAA studios aren't making as many single-player campaigns anymore. I think that's part of why Resident Evil Requiem was so popular. People want a game, not a habit. But smaller studios are still carrying the single-player torch. It's just that people who are complaining only want to play games from AAA studios. Considering all these other changes, there was one tag I was really surprised didn't get added. There's an ongoing campaign to get a fake OS tag. These are games designed to simulate an operating system, like retro Microsoft, cell phones, or general software interfaces. They're often hacking or investigation stories where you have to navigate an opaque system to find information. They've become really popular in the last few years. A huge number of devs are behind this push, including the creators of Her Story, Home Safety Hotline, and Inscription. They recently held a showcase called Interface X26 with a sale that included over 150 fake OS games. There is precedent for a campaign like this. In 2024, the devs behind Dwarf Fortress and Deep Rock Galactic demanded dwarves get added, mainly as a bit. They were initially told no unless they could rally people to recommend the tag manually. That worked, and dwarves, along with elves, were added. But fake OS so far hasn't been, and that's kind of perplexing. Tags are meant to help devs categorize their game, Steam to sort them, and players to find them. Here's a group of devs demonstrating a need, and nothing. Maybe the folks at Valve only played along with the Dwarves campaign because it was a funny bit. Maybe they don't like fake OS games and don't want to support them. Maybe this time next year that tag will be added. At the end of the day, it's an opaque system. Regardless of the needs of devs and players, Valve has the ultimate control. Thank you for watching this video, and a special thank you to Eben, Entheogen, and Zach. It says here you're all tagged with cool, smart, kind, and sexy, but in a safe for work way? Steam, you've gotta clean up your tagging system. Hey, if you like deep lore, chaotic comedy, and experiments in sensory experiences, check out Burnt Cookbook Party, my Pathfinder actual play podcast. It's set in a time loop, and we get pretty wild with it. And right now we're embarking on a brave new world of podcasting, which is Smell-O-Vision. We've concocted an episode centered around a custom scratch and sniff postcard, which we'll send out to Patreon subscribers. But you've still got time to binge listen and catch up with the show and get in on that before that happens. Find it in any podcast app at Burnt Cookbook Party. Valve is cowards.